Okay, great. Thank you, Michele. So, welcome to everybody. It's really great to see so many people. Oh, please, somebody turn off your sound. Thank you. Really pleased to see so many of you and looking forward to another excellent hour and a half as we've had in the previous webinars. We have started recording, so just be aware of that. The plenary sessions will be recorded. So if that's a problem, please just do whatever you need to do for yourself. So I'm Trudy Newton. I'm a member of the Ethics Committee, and this is the third ethics webinar that I've been the moderator for. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But first, I just want to introduce a few people to get us started. And the first one really is Michele from Brazil, who is our technical whiz, and we could not do this without her. So I just want to say that right at the beginning. And I've spotted a few members of the Ethics Committee. So Jan, who is co-chair, could you say hello?
Hi, everyone. Great to see so many people here. Just wonderful.
And Anne Tucker. Unmute
Hi,
yourself.
everyone. Lovely to be here again.
And I think Tomoko might be here, but I can't see her.
I'm here.
Ah, there you are. Hi. Tomoko in Japan is another member of the Ethics Committee.
Nice to be here.
We're not all here, but I don't think I've missed anybody who is here. So we are the people who've been designing and preparing these things. And so just wanted to acknowledge everybody. So just to say very briefly, this is the third of our ethics webinars. We started in February. The first one was to present to the membership the results of the survey that we did about ethics. And so we looked at what people had said they wanted as part of that process. And some of the things that people said they wanted were more opportunities to explore ethical issues together in mixed groups, in international groups, and also more training in thinking about ethics. So the next one that we did in May was really an exploratory process where we posed some very simple issues and encourage people to look at them from different points of view. So this third one of this year is looking at things from a slightly more theoretical perspective. It's really about encouraging thinking about ethics at different levels. And we are absolutely delighted to have Karen Minikin here. Can you wave, Karen, so that everybody knows who you are? Karen is going to talk us through some ideas about different levels of ethical responsibility, and I'll leave all the content to Karen herself. And I just want to say a very quick word of explanation or apology that even in the best regulated organizations and committees, sometimes things go wrong. We messed up the dates with Keith. Fortunately, we didn't mess up the date with Karen. So actually, I personally feel it's a really good opportunity to listen to a particular presentation from a particular person and to add to our growing portfolio of ethics webinars and what we can explore through them. So hopefully that's enough background. We will be following the usual thing. I've already said that we're recording. Please mute yourself unless you actually want to speak, in which case signal that you want to speak in some way. We will be asking you to go into small groups and to have discussion in the full group as well. And I think that's all I need to say, really. And just to repeat my welcome and a very special welcome to Karen. So I'm going to hand over to Karen and ask her to introduce herself and to introduce her topic.
Thank you, Trudy. Thank you very much indeed. So I'm Karen Minikin, and I live and work in the southwest of England. And I'm a psychotherapist, a supervisor, a trainer. And I've also spent a number of years being part of an ethics committee for my national organisation. What else to say? Oh, it's probably also very relevant for today to say that I've also done a lot of organizational work in my time prior to qualifying as a psychotherapist. And also I was a teacher, so I also have a bit of a history of being in the educational field as well. So that's the backdrop to today. And much as Trudy talked about listening to me, I'm hoping that what we will be doing more of really is talking together, partly in small groups, but also in this larger group. Because of course, all of us, even if we're not consciously thinking about it at the time, are involved in ethics in everything that we do and all the work that we do and how we teach, how we facilitate, how we work in organizations, education, how we work with individuals. I imagine that for many of us here, that there's something about our values that have drawn us to this, to transactional analysis. So I'm going to say a little bit, first of all, about what I'm holding in mind for today. And what I'm holding in mind for today kind of pivots around 4 things, really. So first of all, as Trudy was saying, you know, if we just reach for our ethics code, reach for our manuals whenever we're faced with a dilemma, it's not really going to be very alive. In fact, we're at risk of using our codes and our values as dogma. So I'm very much thinking about an embodied ethics. How do we embody our values? How do we embody and respond to the dilemmas that we might face in our day-to-day activities? And how do we respond if indeed things have escalated and we're having to face a complaint or we're having to deal with a complaint? The way I think about procedures as well, because sometimes procedures don't get much of a look in, and I just want to flag them up because I think procedures are so important because they are the structures and the processes that guide people along and contain, often they help contain some of our reactions to a particular situation. So I kind of want to flag that up too. And so how to bring our values and our codes alive. What is it that happens? And this is how I thought about it for today. I thought that the context that we live in is extremely relevant. The context that we're actually working in. I'm currently, as I said, working here in the southwest of England in quite a rural community. Is very, very different from my earlier life. So this life, as well as my previous life experiences, as well as my particular cultural backdrop, will inform how I think and respond when I'm faced with dilemmas and situations that require ethical thinking more overtly. The second thing that I'm holding in mind is our values, and not just our values as an organization, but our personal values and what those values mean to us individually. And I think that a lot of our values and the emphasis and the bias we give them are derived from our experience as well as our pain. Because I think when we have suffered and we have experienced our vulnerability, it pushes us to become wiser, really. So I think of our vulnerability as containing our wisdom, as well as potentially our fixations. So there's a kind of both and thing going on that can sometimes need tussling with when we're needing to work through something ethically. And then finally, the thing I'm holding in mind is our conscious and our unconscious reactions. And of course, it's terribly difficult to capture unconscious reactions, but that is why the groups that we talk together in are so important, because it is often through others that we come to realize what we've been holding slightly out of our awareness or very out of our awareness. So I'm hoping to provide opportunity for some of that today, if you're all up for that. And is it all right if I go on, Trudy? You're on mute.
I'm forgetful too. Karen, I never checked with you whether you wanted to invite questions as you go, but I guess if anybody's got any burning thing they want to ask you, they can speak up.
Sure. Shall we see now if anybody wants to check anything out?
Looks like we can go on.
Yeah, okay. Right, just bear with me. Okay, so this is going to be really, really interesting, I hope, because we're such an international group today that I'm hoping we're going to get a good mix of frames of reference, if you like, in our small group exercise. So what I'm going to propose is that we have 2 small group exercises, and in that small group exercises, we're going to assign you to rooms where they're going to be 4 to 5 people. We're inviting you to imagine that you are an ethics committee and that a complaint has just come in. The complaint is fictitious. I've made it up, but it is based on some of the experiences that I've had. Okay. And what would be really, really helpful when I read you the case example is that you hold in awareness as much as you can any thoughts, any feelings, any reactions you have, and that you try and capture them without judgment. And I mean without judgment of yourself. You might have judgment of the case, which is fine, but that you try not to judge yourself for whatever comes up for you. That would be really helpful. Okay. So I'm now going to read you the case example. Okay. So if you just bear in mind and just try and capture your own subjective responses as I read you this case example. As I said, it's fictitious, but it's based on real things that have happened. Okay. So you have received a complaint as an ethics committee from a 3rd year psychotherapy trainee. Okay. And it comes, and she is at the moment at a training institute that is very well known. It has a very good reputation. And the trainee has said that her tutor has interrupted her training and also reported her to her voluntary placement. Just to clarify, a voluntary placement is where a psychotherapy student goes to work in a charity or a low-cost agency where they get support for seeing clients, and it is part of their learning journey. Okay. Okay. And the trainer has reported her to the voluntary paid placement to say she's not fit to see clients. She has said this is unethical. And the trainer has actually got a personal problem with her. She says the trainer has not considered the impact on her or her long-term clients, many of whom are very traumatized. She also reports in her complaint that the placement is happy with her work. Okay. Now, having received this complaint, you go to the tutor of the organization and let them know, and then you get a response from the tutor. Okay. And this is what the tutor has said. The tutor says that the trainee cannot regulate her anger and that the trainee seems easily triggered. After an outburst of anger, she seems unable to reflect on her process. Given that she is seeing very traumatized people, the trainer considers it would be beneficial for her to do some more personal therapy before continuing her training. The trainee has also given you more information. She says that she is working long-term with victims of domestic abuse. She says to stop with these clients suddenly would cause harm. The trainee acknowledged that on 2 occasions, she did indeed express her anger towards the trainer in front of the rest of the group. She says this embarrassed the trainer, who did not deal with it very well, and the trainer only wanted to talk about her outburst rather than the reasons for her anger. Okay. In your groups.
I have a question. Did the same trainer assigned her to this voluntary work, or it was someone else who assigned her?
Somebody else within the organization who deals with the placements assigned her to this organization. Okay, good question. Okay, so your task initially is simply to share in your groups your subjective responses to this scenario. Any immediate thoughts or feelings or any imagination that you had about this situation, you share in your group with each other. And then after a few minutes, I'm going to give you another question to think about. And then a few minutes again, I'll give you another question. Okay, but first of all, just your responses. Is that okay with everybody? Okay, marvelous. Okay, great. Okay, is that Michaela? Here we are.
Beautiful one, Karen. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Helen. So over to you. Would anyone like to say how you got on with that? Besides Helen. Or I don't know if you wanted to say any more, Helen.
I just what I really appreciated was being with our process, being with a diverse group. It really helped us kind of, I think, helped me reflect more broadly, which was
Great.
Yeah, and thinking particularly about a cultural, and our cultural parent, and so that was really useful to be with a broad cultural selection, including from the north and south of England, which has a very different culture. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Did anyone else want to? Yeah,
I just
share?
want to remark, not share, from the group, about the group. We were 4 Indians and a Swiss. So much for diversity. 3 from Bangalore at least.
Well, that's interesting in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
In our group, we did have some interesting questions around whether the trainer had supervisors, what kind of a contract did they have before, and our subjective experiences, our inclination towards the client or the trainee. So we had very interesting, diverse questions and thought-provoking. Yeah.
Sounds really interesting. It sounds as though also, whilst your questions were practical, it sounds, some of them, like does the trainer have supervisor and so on and so forth. You were thinking about the holding environment for everybody here.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Lovely.
And also what kind of entanglement was that? Because it's 3 years long relationship and so much process there. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you, Hasina. Would anyone else like to ask it or say anything? Mo, is that you?
Yeah. I was looking to see if I was mute, but I wasn't. So yes, me. Our group first of all focused on our emotional reactions, which was interesting. I was a bit puzzled when you asked about the rationale.
Mhm.
So that took a bit of discussion, and for me, the rationale came down to a background in restorative justice. So I was more looking at, you know, we don't know enough. We all said we don't know enough. There needs to be more exploration.
Mhm.
And yes, more recognition of diversity probably as well. Maybe there's diversity here. And is anybody looking at that? And the differences between the training group and the work of as a therapist in the placement. So we were raising those things, but all had different emotional reactions, I think.
Lovely. Okay, you're touching on some very important themes there, aren't you, about the different areas you might want to understand better. Lovely. Thanks, Mo.
Yes, may I say something? I know I wasn't
Go ahead,
in the
Trudy.
groups, but
Yes.
I was intrigued, really, that you first of all asked people to be aware of their responses while you were speaking. And I would be really interested to hear how that played out in the small groups, if anybody is willing to say more about it. I know Mo has briefly, but if there are any other responses from the groups on that, I would love to hear it.
Sure. My initial one was I was being frightened or scared, based on my own experiences as a trainer and seeing some students and supervising some and thinking, gosh, I wonder what they're like with their clients, and seeing them behave in certain ways in the group and not necessarily wish be open to process it or reflect on it, and then having to work that through with them. So yeah, when I read that, I thought, gosh, I hope I'm never in a situation that I have to do that. Not that I would do it like that, but we didn't have enough information. Like everything gets decided in a group. So there wouldn't be a lone trainer informing anyone of anything ever. Like we would just never operate that way.
So, yeah, it's really helpful though, John, for you to illustrate that and to show how your vulnerability, even though it's just a fictitious case study, you got touched and you got it got evoked, and I think is what happens when we are presented with ethics cases or even ordinary dilemmas in our day-to-day activities. We've got two folks with their hands up. So I think Zlatko was first and then Adrienne.
Okay, about feelings. So I was a little bit confused, to be honest. Confused because the question was, can you find or define the ethical question here? So and we were talking about this case, and you know, there are a couple of issues pop up. This is not only, I was confused how to define what is the actual ethical question here, because there are many.
Yeah, okay, good. There are many. Good. You know, I think that confusion is also a valid response to dilemmas which can, as they unravel, prove to be very complex. Adrienne.
Yeah, I had quite a strong emotional response actually in favor of the trainee. And I think I felt, and this might be parallel, angry at the potential abuse of power and the power dynamic between the trainer and the trainee, with the implications for the clients who are already presumably happily in therapy with this trainee. I assume if the placement had no objection, had no complaint, then that was the case. So it felt to me like a potential abuse of power because a trainer couldn't handle the anger or the conflict within the group. And certainly that was my first emotional response.
And I think you've used the word parallel as well, which I really appreciate, because some of you will know this from your own experiences, and certainly it was mine, is that there is always, in my experience, a parallel process within the ethics committee of what has occurred out there. Is that the dynamics feed through and get embodied through the committee members. Thank you for that, Adrian. I think we have time for one more question, and then we will have time for more discussion afterwards, if that's okay. I think Olivier was next.
It's muted.
Yeah. My first emotion in hearing the story was anger. Anger towards the trainer because of the lack of safety, obviously, that exists in the group. And I realized immediately that that also has to do with the little boy inside of me, and relating that to the lack of safety I have experienced as a small child in my own family of history in my past. And while talking about it in the group, I noticed that my feeling was changing. And I also asked myself, I'm supposed to be an ethics committee member looking at this. If I sympathize with the trainee, how fair is that towards the trainer if I have to do something as an ethics committee member? And then while listening to the questions that we asked in the group, I find myself also sympathizing with the trainer. Because obviously there's something in the past of the trainer, probably, I'm guessing, that has made it very difficult for him or her to cope with such a thing happening. And I notice it's okay to be involved and sympathize with one party. I have to sympathize with the other party as well before I can even come close to a fair ethics dialogue about what's going on here. That's what I experienced.
Okay. That's lovely. Thank you so much, Olivia. And as you have illustrated, that when our vulnerability has been touched in the past and we can identify with that, we feel an urge for protection. We feel a desire to immediately protect. And I think that's, thinking as a psychotherapist, that's always a reflection on the unprotected vulnerability that we've all known about, that does it inspire, I think, also our values. So I'm really enjoying your engagement and your feedback. It's super. And I'm also keeping an eye on the time because Trudy has warned me I need to do that. So shall we, is it okay if we go on, Trudy?
It is actually. I think go on to the next stage because we can take more time later for discussion.
Yeah, well, of course. Yeah, okay. Smashing. So let me go on. Coming out with lots of English words today, like smashing.
Yes, I noticed.
Yeah. Okay. So we're now going to assume you've made lots of inquiries, you've had some answers come back to those excellent questions that you were raising earlier, which are all about beginning some form of investigation. Okay, so we're going to imagine now we're moving on a little bit in the procedures. And having received some answers, you decide as a committee that you want to have an individual meeting with the trainee and the trainer. So you've arranged a Zoom call, okay, for each party. Okay, so I'm now going to read out the next part. When the trainee appears, again, before I read this, again, do the same as you did before. Notice any feelings that come up, anything at all. Don't judge yourself. Just let your responses be known to you. Okay. So you hold a Zoom call with each individual. When the trainee appears, you see that she is a young Black woman. the trainer is a white woman and the institute is in an area which rarely recruits Black people. So the first task is to share your responses in the group. And then, like before, I'll follow through with another couple of questions for you. Okay. So we're going to keep you in the same groups because this is the same committee with the same evolving process.
Mo has a
Karen, can I
question.
just ask you to repeat the last bit of that?
Yes.
So,
the trainer, the trainee appears, you see she's a young Black woman, the trainer is a white woman, and the institute is in an area which rarely recruits Black people. Just share your initial responses in your groups.
Is the trainer a young, medium, or elderly white woman?
Just call her middle-aged. Okay. Whatever that means in your context. Okay, she's well known. It's a well-known institute, does really good work. Blah blah. Okay.
Okay.
And just to say, Karen, it's 15 minutes this time,
It's
and you
15
will
minutes.
be feeding in some more questions.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Okay. Yeah, Miss Shelley.
We have so much to talk about. Time's too short.
Do you want to kick off then? Is that Leona?
Yeah, it's me. We had trouble because we were expanding on the subjective feeling, and we were talking about bias and how this also enters into the process. So I mean, how does it affect? Some of us haven't experienced. If we think, we're assuming that there's a discrimination going on, but we don't know. But subjectively, some of us have experience with it, others don't, and that actually does affect the way you look at it. And also, for some, there's not an understanding at all. So, as part of a committee, we actually did say it's really good to have a broad diversity in the committee to look at it, to look at the situation from different angles, from different cultures, from different experiences. And to have a really good conversation about it. But we assume that there's discrimination, but we don't know. Yeah. And so much to talk about.
But also, I think, just to add to your very important point about bias and the possibility of implicit kind of discrimination as well as potential overt discrimination. But there's also the overprotectiveness of fearing being accused of discrimination that also adds complexity to the process. So the anxiety in a situation like this can be heightened, potentially. Lovely. Okay.
Question from David Linford Smith.
David.
Yeah. Hi, Karen. Lovely to see you again.
David.
We were talking about that, just about how uncomfortable these conversations might be. And there was one of your questions, and I can't. It was one of the later questions about how do we start to facilitate this, and the idea was that actually we make our ethics committee as diverse as possible, not just around ethnicity or colour, but actually if our committees that are dealing with, because I was in the group that we're just talking about, our experiences were all different, and actually that made it really good that we could bring different points of view and understand different ways, and our experiences as a white middle class man, I've experienced lots of racism through my clients talking about it. So I do have a real implicit understanding, but from their perspective, not from my own. So if our committees are really diverse, it's going to be really useful to have that, isn't it?
Okay, as a parallel, you mean, and as a place, as you say, of being able to expand perspectives. Lovely, David. Thank you. I think John, John, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, the initial question about my reaction was actually about the description of the people when the committee saw them on Zoom. I don't know what a black woman is, and in the UK, there might be assumptions that they're from a certain continent or from a certain group or from a certain culture. But certainly where I'm from, we just have, I mean, just even the reference to skin color, I just thought, I just reacted to that. So we were discussing that in our group.
Great. Good to have those reactions out there on the table. It's really, really important, I think.
Karen, I'm wondering if you want to move to the diagram and look at this.
Yeah, yes, because time's going on. Okay, so I was going to offer you a little model, seeing as, let me just share screen. Okay, and go to, okay, can you all see that well enough?
Yeah.
So to my way of thinking, in terms of offering some theory for this particular webinar, I was thinking about, I mean, I drew this from the cultural script matrix that Heermath and Shivanath wrote up in 2003. But really what I was thinking of in terms of the theme of an embodied ethics and integrated ethics is how can we have a way of inquiring into all of the different dynamics that play into ethical dilemmas, and certainly then that have escalated and manifest as complaints.
Aaron, can I just interrupt you, because there's a couple of things coming up in the chat that I'm not sure people are seeing what you want them to see. Can you just check that?
Okay. Can you
We are
all
seeing
see
the whole presenter's view, not just the slide.
I beg your pardon. Thank you. Let me just go back to this.
That's it.
Is that better for folks? Yeah, okay, good. That's clearer then. And okay. So I'm taking this from Heermath and Shivanath's model of the cultural script matrix. And I wasn't strictly thinking of a cultural script matrix of drivers and injunctions and all of those processes, although you may choose to use it in that way, but rather as a way of illustrating the different containers we have, the different ways in which we could think of an embodied or an integrated ethics inquiry. Is that potentially here in this case, there is an internal process with what the Black student has experienced within her training as well as within her placement setting. There may clearly some sort of interpersonal process that sounds as though it's unfinished in some way between her and her trainer. There is possibly also an institutional process going on around how to work with diversity, as David was raising. There's also an institutional dynamic going on between the kinds of folk that the placement is seeing and the kinds of folk that the training institute is usually recruiting, and the kinds of cultures that those two institutions have, and what this now means for them, that through this student, they're in some sort of a dynamic, some sort of potentially on the surface of it, an intrusion from the training institute into the placement, potentially. Okay. There's also, in terms of the wider society, there's also the experience of being Black and the experience of, you know, if we assume that the dominant society in this case is a white society, the experience that the Black social group has in relation to the dominant white society, and what of that is being experienced as getting played out within the institution. Now, which of these are just processes that have to be worked with and used, and how that plays into our ethical values and how it shapes our thinking around ethics is very complicated. But to have a model as a way of inquiring into these different dynamics just gives us some way, I think, of containing what could initially feel as quite unmanageable. So I don't know if people had questions or comments, or whether they find that model useful or not useful.
Hi, Karen, it's David again. I just wanted to mention something that came up in one of my therapy sessions with a client who was from Korea, but lived in the UK, and he described himself as he was really angry about people being racist towards him, and he said, we are the model minority. He said, we don't make a fuss, we just get on and accept it. He said, and he compared it to Black people who, he said, you know, they stand up, they fight and stuff, and we don't. He said, we just fit in. And he used this term, model minority, which I don't want to offend anybody by saying that, but that was his experience and his thing, and it made me really think, oh my gosh, I never even thought of it at that level, where there's something really sort of dominantly in his script, his cultural script as a Korean man in the UK, which really fascinated me. I don't know whether it would make any sense, but I wanted to share that.
Well, I think what you're highlighting, David, is something important about the intrapsychic process potentially in your client, and then also the interface between his intrapsychic process and, if you like, the boundary between his race and the dominant society race. And then as he looks around him, what he sees as a different dynamic or a different way of engaging amongst a Black collective with a white collective. Yeah, so
Yeah.
You're illustrating, aren't you, how these dynamics work, because how I think of them as being quite relationally bound, so that the boundaries between all of these, there is a dynamic, whatever it is, varied though it may be, as you're pointing out. Lovely, thank you. I see Adrienne, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think this is a lovely model, Karen, and I really appreciate the discussion. But I have a question, and my question is, all that we've been talking about, including this model, are really useful for supervision, really useful for expanding awareness and understanding. But how does this impact on what the committee do practically with this case? That's what I'm interested in knowing. It's like, what is, given that we understand this, how do we then operate as the ethics committee?
Did you have any thoughts about that?
Do I have any thoughts?
Adrienne, yeah.
Oh, me personally?
Yeah, did you have any thoughts about that?
No, that's why I asked the question. I thought,
yeah.
Yay, this is an interesting discussion, okay. But
so shall I'll respond then, shall I?
We're a committee, we have to,
yeah,
we have to
so
make something happen.
Sure. I think that in all ethics cases, as you said earlier, there is a power dynamic potentially. And you talked about the potential misuse of power between the trainer and the trainee. And that power dynamics comes from the trainer having an established position of authority within an institution. So this can be a way in which we can map the different power dynamics between these different boundaries, if you like, and thinking about, you know, how the responsibility for those positions is being accounted for ethically with the values that are important in order to protect vulnerability. Does that answer your question? For example, shall I go on or,
Well, it half answers it.
Right.
I mean, it kind of expands where the focus needs to be. But I'm interested to know is, what are you going to do now? What are we as the committee going to do now? Having kind of, is it part of a mediation to bring this to the awareness of the trainer?
It might be, because you linked supervision, and of course a lot of complaints will conclude with recommendations for supervision, potentially. So in order to assess a case, you need to assess the complaint and see whether harm has been done, of course, or to see whether there's been either an issue that's been neglected or harm has been done, or where the attention needs to be in order to resolve the issue. So it could be mediation, it could be supervision, it could be extended development. So this might be a way also of trying to highlight where there might be blind spots in one or both parties.
I'm just going to intervene for a moment to say that we only have a few minutes left. Beatrice has been waiting for a while.
So let's hear from Beatrice.
Well, you kind of answered a bit, but we were talking in our group about what is actually the role of an ethical committee. So can we, is there a description of what is it that the committee, in what is the place that the committee takes within our society, within, for example, the institutes, within people studying TA?
I think it's a good question and a very important one, especially given that we've started talking about power. So I'm going to, Trudy, did you want to respond? I'm just going to come back.
Oh, okay. Yes, I will respond very briefly, Beatrice, to say that I think just like we are in the process at the moment in the ITAA Ethics Committee of attempting to widen the dialogue and to explore all aspects of ethics rather than being seen as a kind of court where issues come to be judged, I think that involves looking again at what we mean by an ethics committee. And I'm happy to tell you that at the moment, a lot of work is going on, and Tucker, who is with us here, is the one who's really leading this in revisiting the ITAA ethics codes and ethics manual to see how they can be changed and updated. And hopefully, I can only say hopefully because nothing's absolutely planned yet, but hopefully the next of these webinars early in the new year will be to present some of those ideas and ways forward to the whole membership. And that will be everybody's opportunity to say, what do we want from an ethics committee?
Mm.
Is that fair, Anne? Can I just bring you in briefly?
Thank you. Yes, I think we've been doing a lot of work to think about the language, taking out the shoulds and have tos and musts, and opening it up for dialogue rather than being very definitive. So having an opportunity to really think about what we can learn from the process rather than actually coming in with a judgment. And there's a lot of work to do. We need to finish off the work that we've been doing, and then we need to take that back to the Board of Trustees and also to the membership, say, what do you think? You know, is this the way that you find would be useful and helpful? And I loved your comment or your question, Trudy. What do you as a membership want? What do you want from an ethics committee? So I think that's a lovely question.
Good. Well, I regret to say that it's a lovely question that may need to be the last one, because the time is going on, and I do want to give the last few minutes to Karen for your feedback and responses to Karen overall. The chat is filling up with people saying, I must go, and thank you, it's been great. But it would be good to have a few minutes, I think, just with responses to Karen and anything that you'd like to say as closing remarks, Karen. Sorry, that was a bit confused. Okay, participants first, then Karen.
Okay, thank you, Trudy.
So, any final
Thanks,
thoughts?
Karen.
Well, Trudy, I posted the question to you, but might be for all the organizers. Can these webinars be posted somewhere permanently so we can get back to them, not just temporarily?
No, they are, and I'm going to ask Michele to explain that, please.
Yes, we will upload this webinar in the ITAA YouTube channel, and then we'll send a message with the link for everybody.
So everybody can access them.
Yeah.
Okay. For not just temporarily, they're going to be there.
Yeah, for some months.
Okay. Thank
so
you.
The previous two webinars are there at present, and this one will be added to them.
Can
Karen.
I just say thank?
Oh,
can
sorry.
I just say thank you to Karen Karen? You started by saying about we don't just want to grab the ethical guideline and use it as and when we need it. What this has proven is the dynamic aspect of all our experiences that we bring to what are guidelines. They're not you must, these are guidelines, and we bring all our own stuff to it. There's such a dynamic aspect in ethics. So thank you for really bringing that to life.
Thank you, David. I see Sue has a hand up. Do we have time to do that? To listen
Well,
to
people are leaving quite fast, but if it's quick, then yes. But I would. Oh, Sue, there you are.
I would just want to say thank you, Karen, for raising the complexity involved in internally navigating and interpersonally navigating, and your model really gives us a way to structure our thinking and curiosity. So thank you, and thank you to the ethics team, and please can we have more of these? They're great. It's been really good. So
we will have another 3 next year, hopefully.
I want to say thank you to everyone for engaging in this. It can be really annoying when you only get a little bit of information about a case and then you're told to go away and work with it, and you're desiring more information and more knowledge because you want to do it properly and professionally. I understand that, but you've engaged with the spirit of it, which was to try and integrate or get a feeling inside of what it's like to wrestle with these sorts of questions and to account for the power dynamics that inevitably always arises in these ethical dilemmas or ethical complaints. So I wanted to express my appreciation to you all. Thank you.
And it's my very happy job to end with a big thank you to Karen, because I think you've really given us such a lot today, and big appreciation from everybody, and certainly from the Ethics Committee themselves. So many, many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So goodbye to everyone. It's really been great to be with you all, to see so many faces and to have such a good discussion. And so I suggest the team, if we can take the time, stay behind for just a few minutes. And to everybody else, have a good day or a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.